One thing I want to point out here is that Prop is being extremely uncharitable with their framing, right? The first point here is that they stated things that contradict their own case. Firstly, they state that we should explain how these narratives affect people and their mindsets and their desire to, for example, try harder. But then they also state that this narrative only actually appears and only applies for those who already tried their hardest to success and not those who are lazy and not those who don't actually try to succeed, right? I think this is very uncharitable, as we should consider how these narratives affect everybody and how they influences these people to become more lazy, for these people to not actually try on their side of the on their side, right? Secondly, they also stated that this doesn't that in their side that this narrative also only applies when in times that you fail and don't apply anywhere else. But as I already stated, like any other narratives within society, then we should examine how it affects you even outside of specific situations, and even in, for example, other things, even in when you're practicing, for example. I think that secondly, I also think that their idea about how, like for example, you gain more experience when you fail, then two things, right? Firstly, I don't exactly think what the motion is trying to say, and it's inherently missing the spirit of the motion. This means that this is not about whether this narrative is necessarily true or not, but it's about how it affects people. And let's say, secondly, even if we assume that that is the spirit of the motion, then later on we'll explain why failure does not exactly correlate to trying more and does not exactly correlate to hard work at the end of the day, right? I think that now then I just want to expand more on what I mean by that. I think that the inherent stigma against failure is what motivates people to be able to succeed in the first place. Elaborate more later. Yes.
The problem with this argument is very simple. When you fail, you lose hope. It's very hard for you to get back up again. Only this narrative generates the momentum for you to do so. We don't think stigmatizing failure actually does anything on your side of the house.
Also, I also want to point out that they're actually inherently misattributing what the narrative looks like. This narrative does not look like, oh, failure is normal. This narrative says that you need to fail in order to succeed. Later on, we will present a counter narrative that still ensures the same success. And even if we accept that trade-off, we will explain why in general, then this is better for society in the first place. And now, lastly, one of their impacts is also based on that. Society is more willing to dedicate their resources to those who fail. Later on, I will explain. I think that later on I will explain why this can still happen on our side. But not only that, I also want to state here is that for those who have failed multiple times, and for such a world where failure is normalized, and you don't actually try to get and you don't actually try your hardest, for example, then I don't see any reason why society dedicating their resources to these people is actually bringing back any actual good impacts to society in the first place. If these people are just they've been so desensitized to failing, then why should society actually dedicate their resources to these individuals who don't want to try, right? Now, going to my few points of framing, firstly, what will be our counter narratives? I think that our counter narratives here is that to a certain extent, yes, you should still aim for success. We say that we said that the main narrative here is that you want to aim for success, and failure is definitely more stigmatized on our side of the house. We accept the trade-off, but we also state here is that people will not just shame you and exclude you from every single community if you fail one time. People will say that you should actually practice harder because you want to succeed, right? I think that secondly, I also want to state here is that failure is something heavy. I think that failure doesn't look like failing in spars or when you practice. Failure looks like, for example, you fail when you want to when you join a debate tournament, you fail in one of the rounds and therefore you can't qualify, right? These are ones that are on bigger scales and are not ones that you actually face in practice because it does not pose any direct threats to basically what you want to achieve in the future. And also, I think it looks like not everyone can afford to fail or can afford to try again. This looks like, for example, not everybody can afford to go to debate tournaments more than twice. Not everybody can afford to go to ASBC this year and also to go to ASBC next year, right? I think that when you I I think that when in their world where this narratives look like that, then that means that there will be a social emphasis on experience. That means that people who, for example, debate for 5 years and who, for example, go to many more competitions and who experience many more failures will be more valued than those who already succeed in the first one, or those who don't actually, or those who only participate in like 1 or 2 tournaments, right? I think that precisely because of these reasons, then this would de-incentivize people to actually firstly try, and secondly to approach any actual sports or any actual tournaments ever again. What does this mean? I think that this means that when you see that, oh, only if I fail 1 or more times, only if I have the ability to actually go to these tournaments again, that's only when I can actually quote-unquote true success. And because of these reasons, if you don't see that you have the capabilities to join a tournament more than 1 time, then you will be disincentivized to actually ever joining it or to actually ever pursuing it, because you know that you will never be valued, because even if you success, then nobody would count that success and would just misattribute it to you being lucky or anything ever again. And it also looks like people will shame and people will say that you are not that you don't these people will shame individuals for actually wanting to succeed and thinking that they can succeed in the first time, or they will also misattribute these successes to being lucky when these people only attended it in the first few times, right? And I think that their burden, I think that they've also been avoiding their burden the whole time. I think that their main burden is firstly how to prove that success, to prove that the incentive to try hard and to success is mutually exclusive to their side, and also to prove that this narrative will not actively exclude people and disincentivize people to try harder. I think that our burden here is to prove that, well, this is not mutually exclusive and it's better on our side, and and the same thing for the second one. So I think that I think that my last point is about the incentive to try harder. As I already stated, because failure is something that is normalized, that's why people think that it is actually fine to fail, and there's a loss of competitive spirit, right? This means that I go into this room without thinking that I actually need to success, because I see it as something that's normalized and not part of the stigma. Because of these reasons, second speaker will expand more on the impacting. I rest my case.